Have you ever seen ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and wondered how we can read them? Because these symbols look so strange and beautiful at the same time that it seems impossible to understand what they mean. And if we can understand them, then why did it take so long for us to decipher this language? Because most of us know about the Rosetta Stone, which is the key to unlock ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, but there is more to the story than meets the eye. So here's how to read hieroglyphs in 10 minutes. First, let me show you an example of how hieroglyphs look. Here is an inscription from the Cairo Museum that says Nefermat, and underneath it, you can see its transliteration into Latin characters, which is a way to approximate the sounds of the Egyptian language using our alphabet. But the museum also provided an English translation of the inscription, which reads, "Beautiful is the thought." So, now we know that this inscription praises the beauty of something. But what does this symbol actually say? Well, it's not just one word, but two. The first part is the determinative sign, and the second part is the name of the object. So let's start with the determinative. If you look closely, you'll notice that this sign has a small circle at the top and 3 horizontal lines coming out of it. These lines represent rays of light that are emitted from the sun. And if you have been following for a while, you would already know that ancient Egyptians kept everything in connection with the sun. Even their days started and ended with praising the sun, because they considered him the supreme god. And all other gods were either aspects of the sun or dependent on him. You can learn more about ancient Egyptian religion by watching this episode. But back to our example. The circle in the determinative resembles the sun disk, which indicates that this sign has something to do with light or radiance. And we know that thoughts cannot be seen. So the radiance must refer to something visible that represents or symbolizes the thought. There, in this case, it is the face. So when you want to read an inscription, you have to think about the context. What does the context suggest? Is it a person, place, object, or an action? This helps you determine the meaning of the unknown signs and reduce your options. And in this case, you can see that the next sign looks like a stylized face. So, now you can guess that this combination of a radiant face means good or beautiful thoughts. When the face is turned upside down, it takes the opposite meaning, which means bad or evil thoughts. In fact, the determinative is always placed at the beginning of the inscription, and it acts like a supercategory that groups related words together. For example, if you see a determinative with a bird on top of it, anything that comes after it would be a type of bird. So you have to memorize these determinatives to get the general idea of what you're reading. Now let's talk about the rest of the inscription, which is the name of the object. We already know that this example praises the beauty of something. But what is that something? Well, if you look closely at the last sign, you'll notice that it has the determinative of a house. This house has a door at the bottom and a window above the door. And you can see the same pattern in other inscriptions. For example, this one says, "House of Beautiful Thoughts, Sins." And this third example confirms it even more. So based on this evidence, we can conclude that the first part of the inscription is describing the qualities of the house. And now you might ask, how do we know that this word means house and not some other word like palace? Well, here's where the Rosetta Stone comes into play. Tone. The reason why we can read hieroglyphs today is because of a stone slab called the Rosetta Stone, which was discovered in 1799 by Napoleon's army in the Egyptian city of Rashid. It contains the same text written in 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic, demotic, and ancient Greek. Hieroglyphic is the formal type of writing used in temples and tombs, and demotic is the informal type of writing used in everyday life. They both use the same symbols, but demotic simplified the hieroglyphic script and made it easier and faster to write. Let's go back to the Rosetta Stone. Since we knew how to read ancient Greek, we could easily translate the Greek version of the Rosetta Stone. And by comparing it with the hieroglyphic script, we could identify each symbol and its sound. However, the Rosetta Stone was not enough to fully decipher the language, because it contained only a small portion of the entire script. To complete the rest of the puzzle, we had to rely on a French scholar named Jean-François Champollion. He traveled to Egypt and spent years studying the language until he realized that hieroglyphs were not just pictures with sounds, but a true alphabetic writing system that had consonants and vowels. And to prove his theory, he found the name of Cleopatra written in hieroglyphs. With this discovery, the whole language opened up before us, and we were able to read many other inscriptions. Now, let's finish the last part of our example. So the first part tells us that we are dealing with a house, and the second part is telling us that we are talking about beautiful thoughts. In this case, the concept of house is used metaphorically to describe a person who embodies these beautiful thoughts. So, the full meaning of the inscription is that the woman whose thoughts are symbolized by a house with a radiant face is beautiful. Reading hieroglyphic texts requires a lot of concentration and memorization. Just imagine that you can write an entire book using only 24 symbols. So every single sign should be memorized along with its multiple meanings and the context. That's why it took so long to decipher the language. It wasn't because the symbols were too complex, but because there were too many options to consider. We still have another 3,500 years to explore ancient Egyptian culture, and hopefully one day we will be able to read their language fluently. By the way, thanks for reaching the end of the video. As a token of my appreciation, here is a bonus tip. If you found this video useful, please leave a comment below and tell me what you learned today. Your feedback motivates me to create more interesting content for you. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.